A special model of the traditional Finnish puukko knife was produced in his honor. Many museums in Finland have special exhibitions telling about his life. In 2010, for his combat service in Vietnam, he became the first foreign honorary member of the U.S. Army Special Forces. In Colorado, the 10th Special Forces Group building at Fort Carson Army Base is named in his honor. Last year, the Swedish power metal band Sabaton, whose work is almost entirely related to military history, released the album Heroes. In this album, there is a song dedicated to the Finnish national hero Lauri Törni, called Soldier of Three Armies. In our country, where the memory of the war is too fresh and the majority of people negatively perceive everything that is somehow connected with the Third Reich, this man will never become a hero, but no one can deny that. Due to his unusual life path, Lauri Törni became one of the most interesting personalities in the military history of the XX century. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. See you soon. Hi, glad to see you on your channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. Have a good view. What do you call a man who has devoted his entire life exclusively to war and military service? Someone who proved himself as a good soldier and a worthy officer with a keen sense of justice, though not quite standard, but still fair? A fighter who had managed to fight under the flags of 3 countries in 3 wars? Perhaps he would be called a hero if we lived in a world where the perception of history does not depend on the fact that one side or another won the war. But we live in the real world, and therefore, although Lauri Törni is praised by some of his compatriots for his steadfastness and courage, for the majority, and especially for the inhabitants of our country, he remains a war criminal, a racist, and a Russophobe who stained his biography by his service in the SS. This article is not intended to cleanse the reputation of the hot Finnish guy, nor is it aimed at belittling his dignity. It is simply a biography of a man who loved to fight and followed his internal code of honor. Read it, and perhaps you will have your own opinion about who to consider Lauri Törni to be: a hero, a criminal, or a typical creature of his time. The choice of vocation and the First War. Lauri Törni was born on May 28, 1919, in the Finnish town of Viapuri, now Vyborg, Leningrad region, in the family of a naval captain. Like most of his peers, he loved skiing and hunting. Upon entering college, Lauri became interested in the military and then joined Schutzkorps, the Guard Corps, a paramilitary organization that took over law enforcement after the dissolution of the Finnish police in 1917. After that, in 1938, Törni volunteered for the army, where he recognized his potential and was sent on a course, from which he returned with the rank of junior sergeant. Lauri Törni's promotion to sergeant coincided with the start of the Soviet-Finnish War, under the command of Major Matti Armas Arnio, nicknamed Matti the Boilermaster. He was part of the 4th Jaeger Battalion and participated in the operation to ring and destroy the 18th Infantry Division under the command of Colonel Kondrashov in the infamous Valley of Death. During the fighting, Lauri was noted by the command as a fighter capable of decisive action. He was therefore sent to officers' school. For Törni himself, this was another confirmation that he was not mistaken in his choice of vocation. By the end of the Soviet-Finnish War, Lauri Törni came to the rank of 2nd lieutenant, and with 3 awards on his chest, the Bronze Medal of Freedom, the Silver Medal of Freedom, and the Winter War Medal. Along with his final choice of profession, it was during this period that the young Finn's emergence as an ardent anti-communist, nationalist, and Russophobe took place. However, compared to other Europeans who held the same views, Lauri had good reasons for it. The fact is that the outcome of the war was the Moscow Treaty of 1940, according to which the Soviet Union gave the Soviet Union about 40,000 square kilometers of Finnish territory, and among these lands was Törni's small homeland, the city of Viapuri. The young lieutenant was deprived of his homeland and his parents' home, and if one is not prejudiced, one can understand why Lauri Törni, like many young Finns, chose the Reich's side in the upcoming world conflict. Finnish Revenge in May 1941, Lauri Törni and a group of nearly 1,300 Finnish volunteers traveled to Germany, where they received military training to serve in the SS. Later, the trained Finns formed the SS Frivilligen Bataljon Nordost. As part of this battalion, Lauri was promoted to the rank of Untersturmführer, which is equivalent to the rank of lieutenant in the Wehrmacht. The German attack on the USSR in June 1941 probably saw Törni as a great opportunity to settle accounts with the Soviets, but the SS main office had its own views on his fate. In July of the same year, the young Finnish Untersturmführer and several other officers were demobilized and sent back to Finland. The reason for this was that the number of officers in the SS Battalion Nordost exceeded the authorized number of officers. In short, there was simply no suitable position for Lauri Törni. In August 1941, Törni, commanding the 8th Light Special Detachment of the 1st Division of the Finnish Armed Forces, entered the war with the USSR. His detachment began its combat journey with the Karelian fortification, then took part in the occupation of Olonets, Petrozavodsk, and Kondopoga, as well as in the capture of Medvezhegorsk and Pindushi. After the Finnish troops managed to block the railway connection with Murmansk and stabilize the situation at the front near Medvezhegorsk, Lauri and his special detachment were involved in reconnaissance raids. In March 1942, Lauri Törni was promoted to lieutenant, but a few days later, during one of the reconnaissance operations in the area of the same ill-fated Medvezhegorsk, Lieutenant Lauri Törni stepped on a mine and received a portion of shrapnel. He, partially paralyzed, is sent to a military hospital. However, along with his wounding, the Finn is promoted to the rank of senior lieutenant. By the time Lauri, who had recovered from his wounds, returned to the war, it had already passed the phase of active fighting and became a position war. Senior Lieutenant Törni's unit was disbanded, and he was assigned to the 56th Infantry Regiment, which by a fortunate coincidence was commanded by the very same Matti Arnio. Remembering Lauri Törni's services in the previous war in December 1942, Matti instructed him to recruit volunteers from the 1st Division in order to create a separate company of gamekeepers on their basis. This company was needed to carry out special tasks, including behind the front lines. By January 1943, the Special Gamekeeper Unit was staffed. All soldiers of the Special Huntsman Unit, which in unofficial circles was called Törni, wore on their uniforms patches of blue color, where against a background of yellow lightning stood a large red letter T. The biggest victories of this unit can be considered the work in the rear of the Red Army in Karelia. Among other merits, in March 1943, the Huntsmen were able to prevent Soviet saboteurs from crossing the front line to the rear of the Finnish troops. From July 26 to August 13, 1944, Lauri Törni, who had already received the Mannerheim Cross, took part in the battles of Ilomantsi. It is noteworthy that it was during this period that the future Finnish president Mauno Koivisto fought in his unit. In August of the same year, Senior Lieutenant Törni became a captain, but already on September 19, 1944, Finland concludes an armistice with the USSR and the war between the Finns and the Russians ends again. A matter of principle, after Finland concluded an armistice with the USSR, it turned its arms against Germany under pressure from the new Allies. Lauri Törni remained true to his principles. At that time, he had no choice but to refuse to take part in the Lapland War and go into the reserves. But chance brought him into contact with the pro-German resistance movement, whose members actively cooperated with the Abwehr and prepared a number of sabotage operations in case the Soviets entered Finland. Thanks to these people, Törni traveled to Germany on a German submarine in January 1945. There, he taught German soldiers how to conduct warfare in winter conditions, at the same time taking a course of advanced training in the SS Jagdverband. After a while, it became obvious that the USSR was not planning an invasion of Finland. To participate in sabotage operations against his country was against the moral principles of Lauri Törni, so the German command sent him to fight on the Eastern Front. In April, for his services to the Reich, Laurie received the extraordinary rank of SS Hauptsturmführer, which is equivalent to the rank of captain, and the Iron Cross Second Class. A few days before the end of the war in Europe, Turney surrendered to British-American forces and was placed in a prisoner of war camp in Lubeck. In the post-war confusion, he managed to escape and return to Finland. But there in 1946, a charge of treason against the motherland was brought against him, followed by a sentence of 6 years in prison. In 1948, Turney received a presidential pardon despite 3 escape attempts in his incomplete 2 years behind bars. Even after his release from custody, Turney seriously feared another arrest. So in 1949, he escaped to Sweden, where he used false documents to enlist as a sailor on a ship to Caracas. In Latin America, fate once again brings him together with former commander Matti Arnio. It is not known what topics they talked about, but a short time later Turney enlisted on another merchant ship. When his ship was passing through the Gulf of Mexico, the Finn jumped overboard and, after reaching the shore, traveled to New York. The Finnish-American community helped Laurie get a job. First, he worked as a carpenter and then as a janitor. In 1953, he was granted residency in the United States. Turney's last war. In 1954, the Finnish fugitive changed his first and last name and was now called Larry Allen Thorne. With his new documents, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. In the ranks of the American Armed Forces, he met former Finnish officers who had fought on the side of the Reich. Some of them served in the Special Forces. Having learned about the exploits of the new recruit in the ranks of the Finnish Army and the SS, they pulled him to themselves, and soon 35-year-old Private Larry became a Green Beret. For several years, Thorne trained American soldiers in winter combat tactics, skiing, guerrilla warfare, and basic survival, while learning to parachute. By 1957, Larry Thorne was already at the rank of first lieutenant. From 1958 to 1962, he served in the 10th Airborne Group of the U.S. Airborne Forces, which was based in West Germany. In the 60s, he and his team successfully conducted an operation to evacuate classified documents from the crash site of an American spy plane in the mountains of Iran. This mission seemed impossible to the command, but thanks to Thorne, it ended successfully. Larry was promoted to captain, and his name became a legend in the U.S. Special Forces. In 1963, Thorne was deployed to Vietnam. Larry, who had spent most of his military career fighting the Soviets, now went to Vietnam to fight the local communists, who had the USSR secretly behind their backs. During the 6 months spent in the jungles of Southeast Asia, Captain Larry Thorne received several wounds, as well as the Bronze Star, Purple Heart with oak leaves for repeated wounding, Distinguished Flying Cross, Legion of Honor, and several medals. In 1965, Thorne, as part of the top-secret U.S. Special Forces Unit Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, which is short for MACVSOG, participates in Operation Shining Brass, the purpose of which was to locate and reconnoiter the Ho Chi Minh Trail. On October 18, 1965, during one of the operations, the helicopter, on board of which was Captain Larry Thorne, got into a thunderstorm and crashed 40 kilometers from Da Nang. The Finn's body could not be found, but during the investigation, the command concluded that he had probably died. In 1996, he was posthumously promoted to the rank of major in the U.S. Armed Forces. In 1999, the remains of Larry Thorne were discovered. Until 2003, their identification took place. And when all formalities were settled, Thorne and the Vietnamese helicopter pilots were buried with honors at Arlington National Cemetery as heroes of the United States of America. Life after death. Beginning in the 1990s, Laurie Turney became increasingly talked about as a war hero, which created a lot of controversy. Some argue that Turney was an SS man, and the actions of the SS in the war were recognized as criminal by the Nuremberg Tribunal. Therefore, the Finn is also a war criminal and a priori cannot be a war hero. It is also often recalled that in 1946, he was accused of treason against his homeland. Laurie's defenders believe that it is not quite right to hang the sins of the Sonderkommando and SS units guarding concentration camps on the SS troops. Laurie Turney himself was not found guilty of any war crimes, except for his service in the SS as such, and all the accusations against him are the intrigues of the Soviet and pro-Soviet special services. All this hype attracted the attention of all kinds of pop culture figures to Turney's persona. For example, in 1968, the movie The Green Berets was filmed on the work of Robin Moore, where the prototype of the main character was none other than Larry Thorne. According to a vote among Finnish residents, which was conducted by the National Broadcasting Corporation, YLE, in 2004, Turney was placed 52nd in the list of 100 greatest Finns.